Hello, everybody. How are you? Good. All right. Thank you for the few who have turned on their videos. Really appreciate that. Um, for those of you who haven't, please feel free to turn on your video if you are so inclined. It's kind of nice to see your face and have that conversation with you. So we have three panelists who have joined us tonight to talk about school psychology. Okay, so we are going to let them introduce themselves. Then we'll have some sort of general panel discussion and questions. Then we will go out into breakout rooms, and you can choose who you want to go and meet with and ask some individual questions. Okay, and you're able to move back and forth between the breakout rooms. So if you want to ask more than one of our panelists questions, you are welcome to do that, and you can jump back and forth in the breakout rooms. Okay. All right. So I apologize, my voice is it's cracking still, so if you don't hear me, please just ask me and I'm happy to repeat. Okay, so let's start with some introductions, sort of what your undergrad major was, graduate major, what's your current position, and what is the main focus of that position. So let's start with Katie. Katie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Katie Drake, and my undergrad degree was in psychology, and then my graduate degree was in educational psychology. And then I have an educational specialist degree also. On top of that, I am currently a school psychologist in Mesa Public Schools. And what was the second part of that
What's
question? It was
what's the main focus of your position?
doing evaluations for special education, consultation whenever there's concerns about potential learning difficulty, whether it's behavioral, emotional, academically, to be there to support parents and teachers and students through that process.
Great, thank you. Jayla?
Hi guys, my name is Jayla. I completed my undergraduate degree. I got my bachelor's in psychology with Dr. C, and then and then I got my master's at University of Houston Clear Lake, and I got my specialist in school psychology degree. And then I currently work at Humboldt ISD, which is like around like the Houston, Texas area. And my main role that I'm doing right now, so kind of similar to what Katie was saying, but my role focuses a bit more on social emotional assessment. So that's like doing special education assessments for students with like emotional disabilities, ADHD, autism, things like that. And also, what she was saying, I do some like consultation with teachers and staff and also provide direct services, so like counseling services to students.
Nice. Thank you, Jayla. And Jane?
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hey everybody, my name is Jane Lindsey. I'm a behavioral interventionist. I work for a mental health agency. I work for Kitsap Mental Health. I have 2 undergraduate degrees. I have one in psychology, which I got with Dr. C, and then I also have a undergraduate in family and human development. I believe ASU still offers that. And then like I said, I'm a behavioral interventionist. I work for a mental health agency, and so my job is not so much about consultation as much as it is I'm sitting in the classroom with students working on behavior, teaching coping skills, while also doing a little bit of care coordination with that. But I'm very much in the classroom with students all day.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, we have a really great panel for you with all working in schools, all doing a little bit of different work. And so I think that's great. And you guys can think of your questions and ask your questions when we get into the breakout room. So thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate that. So can you guys, the panelists, can you discuss your journey sort of from your undergraduate to your current position, how you sort of made that decision and how you found your position? Katie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I went to undergraduate at Point Loma Nazarene in San Diego, and I was very adamant in staying in San Diego, but I did not learn about school psychology until the second half of senior year of undergrad. So with that, I had two of my friends had already been accepted into a school psychology program. I was kind of deciding between school counseling and school psychology. I had interviewed a school psychologist who said, well, for the most part, we're legally mandated and you won't always see like school counselors on an elementary school campus, which is what my preferred age level is. So it was really kind of okay, I'm going to apply to grad school. And I got in, and it was just kind of on a whim, and it's now been almost 20 years later. So it worked out for me. I went to another private school for graduate school. So that was my only limitation, was it was too late to apply to any like state schools or go through the process of that. So I kind of just made my decision on what I thought was available. And I knew I needed to go straight through undergrad and grad school, or I would have never continued on going to school. So
I hear you on that point. Thank you. Jayla?
So I'm not sure if you guys still have it at ASU, but I took a psychology pathways class because I think it was maybe like my sophomore or junior year because I was kind of confused on what I wanted to do. And I kind of stumbled on school psychology throughout like the coursework of the classroom. I like that it was kind of like a master's track. I didn't have to go get my PhD. Just because I knew how much schooling that I would want to do. And at that time, I was like, I can't see myself doing like 5 to 7 years. And so I liked that I was able to work with kids. I liked like being in the school. So there was just different aspects of it. And so I ended up applying to like maybe 3 schools. And one of the areas that I wanted to move to was Texas. And that was the only one I got accepted into. So it ended up working out. And I did it straight away, so I didn't take any breaks, kind of like what Katie was saying. I wanted to go straight through because I knew myself I would get too comfortable. And so that's kind of how I ended up with school of psychology. And I didn't learn about it until college either, too. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. Thank you. And Jane?
So when I was going through college, I had COVID during a couple of my years, so that took me out of the workforce. But all through college, I was a substitute paraeducator. It's a really great job if you want to just try, see if you like working with special education. It's also very flexible. So I did that all through college. I was also an undergraduate teaching assistant with Dr. C for 2 of my years of college, which is like when you start teaching and really integrating psychology, you start to understand it differently and you start to really grow. At least I grew a really deep appreciation for it. And so I was, doing abnormal psych and psych 101 teaching on one side, but I was also in the schools with kids, and I was really looking for ways to combine the two. So I was subbed as a para all through college. When I graduated college, I tried working respite for a little bit, which was essentially in home with the same population I've been working with. I ended up moving back to Washington after I graduated, and was continuing to sub. I felt a little burnt out for a second, so I worked at Starbucks, and really worked. Which Dr. C, I think, is someone who will tell you to work service jobs. It really helps you. And so after working at Starbucks, I found my way back into working with kids in a different environment, and I really, really love it. Working, because I don't work directly in a school, but I work in a school program, and that's kind of been my journey. Embrace change. That's my journey.
It's a true story. Thank you. Yes, that's very important. So can you guys talk a little bit about what are the rewarding aspects of your current positions? Katie?
So it is really rewarding to see the growth, and I've spent a good portion of my career doing preschool. And so you really see a lot because a lot happens developmentally. I'm sure you all know from your developmental psych classes from 0 to 5. And it's that's a really good opportunity to see growth in a short amount of time. It takes a little longer. I've now been at the same school for about, I don't know, 12 years. So I do get to see our kindergartners come in and then see how they're leaving in 6th grade when they go off to junior high. But also, I think what's really rewarding is seeing like parents and teachers really like find new skills because each student is unique and different. And so you just end up being in a position where you have to learn different skills. So when I'm doing it, having a consultation with a parent or teacher, and then I see like something play out that is actually working for them that we discuss, that can be really, really wonderful and rewarding.
Great, thank you. Jayla?
Yeah, I feel very similar. I would definitely say the growth with the students, like really the kids are the best part about the job, just because when you're working with this population, these are students that have specific needs, and when you're able to meet those needs and find those like strategies and things that do support them, it just feels good. And like even working with parents, like after assessments are completed and when they're coming to you at first and they're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and then we're able to give them a solution, and then we give them like the IEP, and then the kid is doing better. It's just really nice to see, and it kind of makes you feel like your job is making a difference, even though some people might not exactly what goes all into your role, or there's just like different components of it. It's just really nice to see the progress between like the students, the staff, and the parents.
Nice, yeah. Good, thank you. And Jane?
The most rewarding part of my job is hands down the students. My program specifically is very small. Like I have about 6 or 8 students in my class, and we're very relationship focused. So building those relationships with kids is what's always going to come first. Most of my students have very, very high levels of trauma. And so being able to be the change in a student's life is something that really just keeps me coming back every single day to work. And I come to work just so grateful for the opportunities that I have to create change in a student's life and to show them what trust can be. And just to feel joy with them. And my program follows the re-ed principles. So incorporating joy into every single interaction we have with kids is really something that brings me fulfillment and joy. And it's great. I love my job.
Nice. It makes a big difference, doesn't it? Yeah, agreed. So do you, excuse me. So would you say that your current job is different than you expected it to be? And if so, how is it different than what you expected? Katie?
We're expected, or I feel like I'm expected to be the expert on everything. So I'm expected to be the expert on autism. I'm expected to be the expert on dyslexia. I'm expected to be the expert on ADHD. And sometimes that, and anything developmental. So sometimes that can get a little overwhelming, especially in the earlier part of my career when I was like, I'm 25, I have no idea. I just so it that definitely has grown, like your knowledge grows with experience. But I think that that's not something that I anticipated going into this, that everyone comes to you for like everything. So I've learned to like be like, oh, let me look into that, or let me like look at the latest research on that because I haven't been asked that in a while, or just things like that, to be honest, that I don't know everything. And yeah, that was pretty unexpected and a little bit shocking at first. But
Were there resources to help you when you first started?
yes, and I consulted and still consult a lot with the school psychologists that I work with, and then also our like resource special ed teachers are a wealth of knowledge. Specialists on campus are a wealth of knowledge. So I just know my go-to people for certain things. And through our national association also, there's just a lot of information on the NASP website. So I was constantly like researching and looking things up, and we have this like handy dandy little handbook for all sorts of things that I could just print out something, read through it and talk with a parent and give them information. So yeah, there is so much out there as far as support. There in my district, there was a new to Mesa program that I did on Fridays where I would go with a new group and we would be mentored. I also was assigned a mentor when I first started. I've now been able to flip and be a mentor. So there was a lot of support, but also I'm in the largest district in the state. So there's more that comes with that.
Right. That's good. Yeah. Because it can be overwhelming when people start coming to you and you don't know the answers. So networking obviously is such an important thing. And I like that you mentioned also the professional organizations, because those are very helpful as well for getting mentors and getting information from. So that's awesome. Thank you. And Jayla, what would you say about whether your job is different than you expected or not?
So I can kind of piggyback on the answer because I'm doing this in like real life right now because it's only my second full year. So just coming from you take your classes in school and everything, right? And what they teach you in school is best practice of everything. And if like it's like perfect world scenario. And then depending on where you go, you might have the perfect experience or you might not. So it's just kind of learning through the hoops about what you were taught in school versus what you actually can do in the school because there's a lot more factors to it. Like if you have the resources, if you have the time, school site, there's a school site shortage right now. So you might have more students than you're technically supposed to. But kind of what Katie was saying, you just kind of adjust to it. And if there's an answer that you don't know, I'll just say, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you. At my district, they gave me a mentor my first year. And so that was really helpful. And I still reach out to her all the time, if I'm being honest. Like there's always, and I've heard from school psychs who are like 10, 15 years in, like there's always a question that you may not know. So like for me, I personally had to learn that it's okay if I don't know something. Like it doesn't make me bad at my job. But I think it's just knowing to yourself that there's always something new. It might not be perfect like the way you thought it was, but it's okay. You can still learn.
Yeah, I like that because yeah, I think it builds trust too with your families and with your kids if you just admit, I don't know, but I'll find out. I think that um is a great way to just be honest and be authentic with them. So, but it's hard to do when everybody's looking at you to have the answers. So yeah, thank you. That's important. I appreciate that. Jane, what would you say?
So I've been a behavioral interventionist across multiple programs. The program I'm in right now, it's a day treatment, which for those of you who don't know what day treatment is, it's essentially the step before residential for like educational placement. So our program serves, the 1%. And we have very at times assaultive students. And so something that I didn't know, I was very nervous about getting hurt at work or what happens, you know, if a student gets escalated. But as I've grown into, and I had a lot of worry about that, but as I've really begun to grow into myself in my career, I've learned skills that keep me safe, or I have really understood the value of relationship, or the value of, you know, setting environments up a certain way. And my job is not anything what I thought it would be, but it's like better in every way. Like it feels to me like I had a niche in special education. I worked there for a long time. And then I also had this very in-depth psychology understanding. And my job right now is essentially combining those two and figuring out how to support a very acute population.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, learning how to use your resources well for both your benefit and your students' benefit is a really valuable skill, and it does take a little bit of time, but it's worth it in the end. So thank you. Okay, we have a few more minutes, so I want to do another couple questions. So talk about what skills or knowledge you learned throughout your time as an undergraduate that you found sort of the most useful in your career. Katie, I'm
I'll go
sorry.
first. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely like all of my undergrad classes in like child psychology, like testing, research methods, all of that was very helpful because I knew which classes were more interesting to me than others. And so when I was looking at my options, I was like, well, you know, school psychology keeps coming up because those are the classes that I'm retaining most of the information about. I love like human development and early childhood. So that I definitely like brought into my grad program. And then pretty much maybe all of my jobs that I've ever had have involved kids in some way. So during undergrad, I was in several schools. I worked in juvenile hall as a special ed TA. I, you know, worked as a playground instruction or a playground supervisor. I worked in a preschool. So I just had a lot of experiences. I worked in foster or with the foster population for a nonprofit. So there was just a lot of experience being around kids and different kinds of kids with different strengths and differences. So those were all things that were helpful for me to bring in then going into a career that was going to work with kids. So
Yes, it's amazing how those classes sort of sneak back up on you, don't they?
mhm.
You're like, oh yes, thank you. Jayla?
I would say definitely just kind of like all the psych specific classes. I remember like abnormal psych, I heavily remember because I was really interested in like that's something that I use in my career now. And then kind of like early development, kind of thinking at the stages of development for kids. I kind of see it where it's at now. So it's just kind of those different classes I remember. And for me, it was kind of the opposite of Katie. A lot of the jobs that I was doing, or I was doing research labs and stuff like that. And that's how I found out what I didn't want to do. So that kind of helped me guide me that I wanted to work with kids, that I wasn't interested in research. So that kind of helped me guided on what things I do like versus what I don't like too.
Great, thank you. And Jane?
So I feel like all of my psych classes really helped me. I will say research methods, now that I work as a behavioral interventionist, I do refer back to a lot of that stuff, kind of like what you were saying, Katie, and stats too. I had to take stats for each of my majors, but I'm actually so grateful that I went through all that because it makes it very easy to look at data objectively. But I also, oh my gosh, I had something I was gonna say. Oh yes. So my second degree, I had to take a lot of counseling classes, and actually I had to take a lot of like what felt random, like marriage and family therapy classes, but I used a lot of those skills on the day to day, and also just Yeah, you guys are nodding. You guys know what I'm talking about. Yep. And it also just at a bigger scale helps me connect with people I work with and helps me really create cohesive teams to have an understanding of, this is how people relate. This is how you can communicate effectively. This is how, the sum of the parts will make something better, right? And then I also do want to say when I was in college, I was a part of it was called the Sun Devil Sexual and Domestic Violence Support Group. It was something along those lines. I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but that extracurricular really taught me advocacy skills, and then of course was also just layered on that communication level and how do you speak to people or how do you speak with victims of assault. But yeah, all those experiences.
Yes, all taking advantage of all of the opportunities that are available on campus. That's one of the really great things about being at a large campus is there are so many different opportunities for you to take advantage of and so many resources to use. So what are some of the job prospects like in school psychology? Katie?
Well, I can tell you that it seems like we always have a position, at least one, to be hiring at any given time throughout the school year. Again, I'm in the largest district in the state, so there's a lot of movement. I wish that I had the number, but I want to say we have over 80 school psychologists in our district. So whether and it is a hard to place job, I think, because not many people have a degree for it, and the rate of jobs out there versus people that are graduating in the field, it seems like there's always going to be a job available. And even if one thing that kind of drew me to this was that there are positions that are part-time, and if you want to go to 4 days a week or 3 days a week, there's usually you can find that somewhere. And now with virtual, like there's a lot of virtual school psychology jobs out there that are available too. So
Nice. Good. Jayla?
So I can agree. I can speak for Texas at least. It kind of depends. Like with school psychology, a lot of things depend on your area, like salary wise, probably like vacancy, stuff like that. But in Texas, there's definitely always job openings, at least when I'm like scrolling on LinkedIn. My district is always hiring one. There's so many districts. I can agree with Katie. My district is pretty large as well, and a lot of the districts around are large. So again, it depends on your area, but I think it's just a projective, kind of like a area of growth too. And with so many kids, like every year we were looking at the numbers of kids in special education, and it just increase and increase, and I don't really see it decreasing anytime soon. So the more kids with special needs, the more school psychologists are going to be needed.
Nice. Yeah, it's a growing field for sure. Jane?
Behavior interventionist jobs are popping up everywhere. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but right now I work in Washington. And I've worked in schools in Arizona, and I've also worked in a lot of schools in Washington. And there are some differences between the states and how they fund special education and how many positions they create within that department. But I know up here, like kind of like what Jayla was saying, like special ed is growing. There's a growing need for students who have 504s or IEPs. And yeah, I mean, it feels like we're learning more and more about the need for specialized education.
Yeah, I agree. I have one more question before we go to breakout rooms. You guys have mentioned quite a bit of work experience that you did while you were undergrads. Can you talk about where you found those opportunities and how you came across those? Katie?
that was a good question. I think actually most of my jobs, this is gonna age me. Well, my university had like a job board that we could access through the website that people could post different positions. Um, but also like Craigslist back in the day. That is where some things were. But because I didn't, LinkedIn wasn't a thing. I don't even have a LinkedIn now because I've been in my district for so long and I have not been job searching. So yeah, it was, and then there were some like word of mouth type things that happened. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question
Yeah.
in
No,
the
that's, yeah. So networking again, networking and just looking at job boards and things like that. So yeah, thank you. Jayla?
So I was kind of all over the place, if I'm being honest, but I was, I had a few jobs, and then also I had, from, if I can remember right, few experiences. Like I know I tried a research lab. I know I did like the undergraduate teaching with a psychology class, and I think I did it with my advisor, and that was really nice too, because she was able, I want to say she was able to write me one of my letter recommendations for my application for my graduation degree. But I didn't really have, regarding psychology, it was more like volunteer type stuff and like the research labs, things like that. But for the jobs that I did try like a receptionist job for a clinic, and that's kind of how I knew I didn't want to be a counselor. Just because I kind of saw the background of everything that goes on, like the insurance and the private practice. And so that was one thing. So I really think you just kind of need to go out there and really just experience everything, and you'll really find what you like and what you don't like, because you can take like all the classes and everything, but honestly, at least for me, seeing like hands-on experiences, it's really different, and I think it'll help with like your discovery of what you want to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you had mentioned the Psych Pathways course, Jayla, and yes, we still teach that course. And some of the people that are, some of the students that are here today are in that course with Allison and I. So yeah, it's a good experience for people who really want to do some exploration. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Jane?
I think networking is really, really big. I know that sounds intimidating when you're an undergrad. I wasn't vibing with it, but now that I'm an adult and a professional, I understand how important it is. My piece of advice is, if you're thinking about going into special ed, just start subbing. It's very like low demand. You get to see a bunch of different types of special ed. You get to see different schools. Different schools will feel differently. You'll get to meet people. That's actually how I got my respite job. Just it was like a handoff because I had worked with a student with some pretty intense needs. They needed some childcare for the summer. I was out of a job for the summer. It was perfect. But yeah, you really get to know what you like, what you don't like, while also, you get to work on skills, pretty low levels of responsibility as a sub. But then also LinkedIn. I just got back on LinkedIn, and there's so many cool ways to connect with different people. And for me, living in a community, where like, I mean, it's so different than college, right? Like not everybody's walking around with all this psychology knowledge, but to be able to meet people on LinkedIn and to grow networks from there, for me, has felt like I've really been able to find a community as a professional.
Nice. Very important for sort of all aspects of your career. So thank